E.T. the Extraterrestrial. David, this movie is definitely something to phone home about, even 40 years later, wouldn't you agree?
It's timeless.
I haven't watched this movie, I don't think, in full since the 20th anniversary. And this afternoon, you and I literally, we're just a couple hours back from seeing this on a limited edition IMAX re-release, I think for just this weekend, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Um, and I don't think I'd watched it since the 2002 20th anniversary edition, where they did that controversial change with, I think this is like a Columbine hangover from a couple of years earlier,
Yep.
where they're like, we can't have the FBI agents at the end, brandishing guns. We're going to digitally replace them with walkie-talkies.
Mm-mm.
And that's the thing is going into this screening, I thought, okay, I want to see this movie again. I want to see it on the big, big screen, even though
Sure.
it was a Limax. It wasn't like the
Yeah.
full, 100 feet tall thing, but it was still nice. I didn't know which version I was going to see, and thankfully, this sounds so weird. The guns are back.
Yay, the guns are back. And you know what? You don't even notice them. I mean, come on.
What I did notice was that a couple of them, and maybe just because I was looking for them, so I paid extra attention, they look almost like. Do you remember in Who Framed Roger Rabbit when Eddie Valiant had the cartoon gun?
Uh-huh. It was
But
almost like the snub nose kind of weird.
yeah, it was. But there were certain scenes in Roger Rabbit where it was the close up had the cartoon gun, but then the faraway shots they didn't bother to animate over the prop, so it was just this weird looking fat prop. A lot of the guns in this FBI scene looked like that, and I don't remember that being the case.
I don't even
So
mind that at all. They looked like props. In
yeah,
fact, it's funny because I was really as you know, we were there. I brought my friend's 11-year-old son with me because he had never seen it, and I was really wondering what he would think about the whole special effects at the end, especially when the bikes are flying in the air, or even when the little Play-Doh balls are flying in the air and circling in Elliot's bedroom. But and sure, those do feel dated, and I love that about the movie, but they don't feel cheesy at all or cheap. They feel magical. Still feel
yeah.
magical, you know.
Well, I'd never really thought about ET in this way, but as the credits rolled at the end, I was like, this is one of those rare, I think, perfect films. And that's, like you mentioned, special effects are going to be of their era no matter when they are made. Some of them hold up beautifully,
Hmm.
no matter when you watch them. Like you look at Jurassic Park, from 1993, it's still, the stuff they're doing today with, Jurassic World Dominion. Yeah, it's all digital and stuff, but it doesn't hold a candle to the imagination that they used back in 93. And the same thing here with ET. The one thing I noticed, and maybe it's because it was on this giant IMAX screen, is when the bikes were flying through the air. I don't know exactly what caused it. At first, I thought it was because it was a trick of like the way the sunlight was hitting the bikes, in the story.
Hmm.
But it seemed like a couple of the kids were riding almost on invisible bicycles. Like the frame was so thin that they almost got matted out or something like that
Hmm.
when they were putting it all together. It was kind of amusing.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember seeing footage of it, like behind the scenes footage of it, and they were all actually on bicycles. It was just a whole lot of like, you know, green screen from back in the 80s,
or
kind of
wasn't
thing.
it was it blue screen back then?
I think it must have been blue screen back then, yeah.
When did that kind of vernacular change? Because I remember coming up, it was all like the buzzword was blue screen, and then eventually it became green screen. When did that
I don't,
happen?
I don't know if green screen was just easier to use or easy to animate. I don't know. I feel like green screen maybe, I wonder if it took place in like, say, Dick Tracy or something in 1990. I'm
Hmm.
not sure. That's another podcast.
There you go. The history of
The history of green
digital
screen.
effects.
When
Yeah.
green went, when blue went green, the history of green screen. Oh, yeah, I don't know.
But I agree. There is a magic to it, and it's such a simple story. I feel like a lot of modern films get so caught up in convoluted storytelling that I mean, this movie was a couple hours long,
Yeah,
but I didn't feel exhausted when I felt exhausted when I got out because damn it, after having seen this movie probably half a dozen times, I haven't seen E.T. as much as other films, but every time it makes me cry at the end. It's
my wife can attest to this. I can just hear the John Williams score and get choked up. It's just that simple. And I was really hesitant. I was like, I hope I'm not going to get choked up during this podcast. That would be really pathetic. But and I was sitting there, and I always wonder what it is about this movie. I was 10 years old when this movie came out, and it's just something that's so wholly relatable. Um, and it's not that my parents had divorced around that time, because that would happen years later, like maybe 4 years later, 3 or 4 years later. But there was something just very relatable about, you know, a busy, exasperated parent, a boy who's maybe has a vivid imagination, who's playing with Star Wars figures in his bedroom, who's maybe not acknowledged as enough as he would want to be, and who spends so much time with his friends on a bicycle, touring the neighborhood in a lot of the undeveloped areas where you see these houses in construction, going on adventures, pretending you're like, in some kind of a movie on your bicycle. Um, and that's what this movie just kind of conjured. Then enter into it an alien botanist who becomes your best friend. I mean, it's just, come on, it's just beautiful.
There, Spielberg definitely, of course, the 1980s were kind of his heyday. And even the movies that he just executive produced, they all kind of had this, or a lot of them had this kind of theme of like the kids on their own.
Hmm.
The adults are kind of ancillary, or if they are involved in the story, it's usually in an antagonistic kind of way. There's a bit where at the end, Elliot and his brother are, they've stolen the government van and they're driving away, and they've got the tunnel, the part of the
Yeah.
tunnel that the G-men scientists were
Bubble
using, and
plastic tunnel. Yeah.
right, and there's two of them trapped inside, and it's hanging off this thing, and Elliot starts taking the plugs of the, I
Hmm.
guess, whatever, out of the
Yeah.
back of it to loosen it from the back of the van. And I was remembered of that scene in the Goonies, which came out a few years later, where the Fratelli brothers are kind of climbing up, I think, the side of the waterfall or something. And I think it was when, oh my gosh, Data, is that when he used the belt to like punch one of
Right.
them out? But they're like,
Right.
it's that same idea of the adults like clambering up towards the kids, and it's almost a
Hmm.
moment of horror, like they're almost gonna reach them. But yeah, it was this was sort of a more of a low key
Sure.
adventure, because there's only a couple of moments of punctuation where there's actual action in this movie. A lot of it is just this kid centric drama with this alien, and I had forgotten a lot of that stuff. The things I noticed this time around were how phenomenal Dee Wallace was
Oh
at
yeah.
playing the put upon single mom who's doing
Hmm.
the best she can, and Henry Thomas. You would point out, I think, as we were leaving the theater, this was his first like role,
Hmm.
and he was probably 10 when he filmed this, because he was born in 71. This came out in 82, so he's like 11 when it came out. I always thought of him as younger, though. I don't know how old Elliot's supposed to be, but like when he's in science class, he's there with Erica Eleniak, who was like 13 when she did this, and 10 years later she's jumping out of a cake naked and under siege, which is kind of strange. But
Yeah.
he seemed like the kid who was like who'd skipped 3 grades, because he looks so much younger than the other kids in that
Oh, for
class.
sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, he's supposed to be 10 in this movie, but even then he acts kind of older and he doesn't really feel 10. But again, maybe that's why it resonated too, because I was a 10-year-old when I watched this for the first time. But yeah, I think I was reading a little bit before I hopped on this podcast, Ebert's review of this, a 4-star review.
From
And
82?
what's that?
Was it from 82?
I think I didn't pay attention. It was either part of his great movies or from 82. I think it was probably great movies, but he was saying that Henry Thomas was probably the best performance he's seen from a child, maybe specifically a boy, of any American film. Yeah.
And I can see that, especially in 1982. And
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a credit to, I mean, partially it's a credit to Thomas, partially it's a credit to, the people who cast him and directed him. in the movie, but there is this, naturalism to him, uh, to the character of Elliot that really comes across. I've really become disenchanted with modern movies. There's so much from 2022 that I haven't bothered to watch
Yeah,
because they're all kind of depressing and generic now. Especially stuff involving like kids. I'm like, I don't I believe that the actors playing these kids grew up watching CW TV shows and
unfortunately.
not being children. Elliot and Gertie and the older brother,
Michael.
oh my, Michael, they all felt like, and maybe it's just the era because I was a kid at that time, but they felt like kids I, would have known in the neighborhood.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, the neighborhood feels like a neighborhood I would have known back then. Even though it's set in California, you got mountains in the background. It's clearly a valley, um, kind of developed in kind of a development style where almost every house looks the same. And, Spielberg's camera work definitely, reiterates that throughout the cinematography is by Alan Daviau. Um, yeah, I mean, it feels like uh, a bike ride away from the Poltergeist neighborhood, right?
I was going to say that, and there's also a shot later on that reminded me of Dreyfus's house from Close Encounters.
Yeah, I could see that. And it's all, I mean, Spielberg grew up in, I think, Arizona in that kind of, valley neighborhood. And of course, you know, uh, he eventually moved to California, but it all is supposed to kind of convey Americana in a way, this kind of suburban, pretty much white suburban, let's be honest, area, neighborhood. And that's maybe another reason why it resonated so much with me is like I felt like this could happen where I live because it was happening in something that seemed so similar and familiar. And yeah, I just thought it was amazing. Watching again today, I've kind of wondered, I'm like, I always like to go back to these movies and think about like how did they open? Okay, so this opens on a starscape, camera pans down to this, Christmas ornament spaceship shaped thing lowering down in a forest. And then all these little ET species, they're probably taking a break from their seat at the Galactic Senate from Phantom Menace.
I thought about that. Like, what if this is where they went after that meeting?
Right, like we got to get out of here. So they're basically like, sampling. They're botanists. They sample shrubs and they take you get the idea that they're kind of taking samples from different planets and studying them. And I was wondering, what if it didn't open this way, but what if it opened with Elliot's home? They're playing Dungeons and Dragons. Kid, go order the pizza, go pick up the pizza, and he hears something in his backyard. Because I think one of the reasons why it didn't open up like that is because screenwriter like Melissa Matheson and Spielberg, both and Kathleen Kennedy, who produced it with Spielberg, they wanted to do an alien visits Earth movie, but an unconventional way, because typically aliens visiting Earth was usually aliens invading Earth, and
Yeah.
usually we should fear them. And I remember even as a 10-year-old viewer, I'm like, well, this is different because this is one of the first alien visiting movies where the alien's not a threat, the humans are. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. Like, even as a 10-year-old viewer, I realized that because I had grown up on like family classics, Sunday afternoon with Fraser Thomas and everything. And
Oh
that's when I
yeah.
first saw War of the Worlds, the original. And so when you first see E.T.'s hands, there's these long, bulbous tipped hands, very similar to the War of the Worlds aliens. And I was like, oh, and Spielberg knows this because, he's a cinema buff. Even as a 10-year-old viewer, I realized that, oh, this is presenting an alien in a different light. This is a friendly alien and the humans are the threat. So I noticed that right away. And I thought that was a nice touch. And the opening is also one of those openings where like It's a very common storytelling trope, I guess you could call it, is when the audience knows a little bit more about what's happening than, say, the characters in the movie. So I was watching it again. I was curious as to like, what if they didn't have that opening and it was just, Elliot with his flashlight looking and trying to figure out what's going on in the backyard.
It would have been a very different kind of movie. Because something that struck me, and I think I would almost like to see if there's a fan edit out there that kind of did skip over that opening,
Hmm.
because when the movie opens, we've got the old style, like, well, I guess the early 80s Universal logo.
Yeah,
And then
it's
it's
so
just
great.
like the black screen, and then ET the extraterrestrial comes up in like this almost pinkish purple lettering, and then you've got the credits, but the music is very kind of spooky. Like
Hmm.
it's not like the sweeping, John Williams score,
Right.
or that we see towards the end. It's not even kind of like playful, like, oh, it's going to be a friendly kids adventure. It's kind of ominous. So I feel like if you open up with those title cards and that music, and you cut right to Elliot going to investigate something in the back shed, um, and even, let's say you rearrange things and have him going into the cornfield, and that whole thing where you see ET like screaming at him and he's screaming at it. That's the opening of a horror movie.
Yeah,
And
totally.
that's, Spielberg kind of burst onto the scene in a big way with Jaws, which was a PG rated horror movie.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know if you can go transition from that to, oh, look, it's the cute, we're going to dress ET up as a girl and then take him out for, trick or treating and stuff. I don't know if you get there, if you can recover from that kind of a horrific opening, but it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah,
So, yeah. But
but
I
you're
think
right.
I think the opening is great.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's watching again, it's a reminder of how great Dee Wallace was in this and how great she is. And just the family dynamic is just all about the casting and how great the casting is. I mean, Drew Barrymore is an absolute gem in this movie, and her innocence and comic timing and is just so great. And I'm just so impressed with how well these child performances are, and I have to say it's not just credit to the casting, but the way Spielberg worked with children is just kind of legendary now, and kind of just a miraculous thing. I mean, what are the things that are difficult to work with? Filming on water, working with animals, working with children. He did it all.
Probably
Um,
working with special effects too.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I don't know about you, when I watched it again today, I noticed right away one of the similarities that it has with Jaws, besides slowly revealing the alien. But um, you remember the scene in Jaws at the dinner table with the
Oh
the
yeah.
mim the mimic scene, you know?
Oh
There
yeah.
there's that again with Elliot. His first communication was just kind of putting his hand by his chin and his nose, and ET was just repeating this. There's this whole a theme of connection that starts with this whole like kind of like comical mimicking, and not just comical but touching mimicking thing between a father and son in Jaws and a boy and an alien in a bedroom. I found that very interesting.
Now let me ask you this, because before we kind of started recording officially, you were reading a vintage paperback from 1982 of the kind of the film tie-in, which is just beautiful. Looks like it's in really good shape too.
It is in good shape. Everything's still intact. Yep.
Have you
It's a
have you read the whole thing?
I
Like,
have not I have not read the whole thing. I might have read the whole thing when I was a kid. It's 244 pages, and it is uh basically a novelization of William Kotzwinkle's novelization of Melissa Matheson's screenplay. And it's funny because, like, you know, there's that whole scene I opened up to a little bit here, and there's this whole scene of them playing Dungeons and Dragons, and then eventually um, Elliot mentioning that the newly separated husband slash father is off with the girlfriend in Mexico, and the novel kind of goes into a little bit in maybe a couple sentences on how that's affecting the mother, Mary, and she's like, when am I going to have you know my time? When do I get to have a guy, or something like that. Just, it's internally she's thinking, well, great, he's off with some girl and I'm raising our children, So it was interesting how it reminds me of how, usually you get a novel that could turn into a screenplay. But with this, it does happen usually, where it'll be a screenplay first and then a novel. But it's kind of rare still, I think.
Yeah, and that's what I found interesting. I think it's a detail that comes out later in the movie is that the parents are separated. They're not divorced, which
Not
I think
divorced,
is
yeah.
more of a common thing. Like, so there's almost implication that even though he's off in Mexico with Sally, I think her name was, that there's still this idea that they're trying to work it out or something. I don't know because they haven't had this clean cut, or maybe it's part of the process. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to bring up that novelization and the screenwriter, Melissa Matheson, because I wonder if she had, I don't know if you have any idea about this, but could that kind of face touching scene be a direct callback to Jaws? Not that they take place in the same cinematic universe, but just as sort of a nod to, a Spielberg film within a Spielberg film. That's
I mean,
not,
yeah, it could have been.
completely cribbing, but it's kind of almost like a proto Easter egg or something.
It could have been. Yeah, I'm not sure because I would like to know like the whole. I never really read up on like where she got the idea. I know like she also did the screenplay for 1979's The Black Stallion.
Mm.
An event. Well, her last screen credit was the BFG with Spielberg. So, and before she
Oh,
died of cancer in 2015. Um, yeah, and the BFG came out the next year in 2016. But yeah, as a lot of people know, she was married to Harrison Ford between 83 and 2004. So that's, of course, growing up being a fan of Harrison Ford, that's how I found. Oh, the writer was Harrison Ford's wife, um, and I wonder how long she was known as Harrison Ford's wife. To actually, but the thing is she got an Oscar nomination for the screenplay to E.T. Um, so I mean, that's pretty cool. Um, it says the script was based on a story written by John Sayles. That John Sayles
wow.
that Spielberg provided to Matheson during the filming of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Spielberg attributes the line "E.T. phone home" to Matheson, though.
Mm.
Interesting. That's interesting. So
That
hopefully,
is.
when that book comes out on the exhaustive book of the ET comes out later this month, I'm going to pick that up and hopefully dig into more. But the thing is like in '82 when this movie came out, ET was everywhere. ET is on the cover of Time magazine. ET was, I mean, eventually we had the crazy Atari video game, which was like ridiculous. Um, and everything. I mean, Reese's Pieces became popular because of ET. Um, in fact, I'd have to look it up, but I think like Reese's Pieces was kind of recently introduced, and I think it wasn't doing well because people were just like, "Huh, I got M&Ms. Why do I need those?" And then it became a huge hit with, because of this movie.
I had heard that. I don't know if it's an apocryphal story or if it's true. But
Hmm.
yeah, I was, I was only 5 when this movie came out, but I was also swept up in the whole, you know, branding of ET. I remember
Yep.
there were I don't
Lunch
I
boxes, bed
there were
sheets.
the Happy Meal toys were weird because they had like the spaceship that was like a pullback and
Uh,
roll thing, and they also had, Elliot on the bike with ET in the basket. I remember having the weirdest thing I had was an ET TV dinner tray. It's like a metal tray with like
yeah,
these fold out legs that are
yeah.
just meant to put in your lap and you watch
That's
TV.
awesome.
And I had one of those until I was like probably 12. Now I'm
It just
back.
had
Well,
it just had ET images on the tray.
it did. Well, it was just one image. It was the one
The
towards
moon.
the end where ET and Elliot are kind of looking up at the ship.
Oh, it's great. It's
Yeah,
great. Yeah, so
it
many
was really
iconic
good.
shots. So many iconic shots. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. Um, yeah.
I want to talk because you mentioned Drew Barrymore,
Hmm.
and she grew up. She's one of those Hollywood cases that is sort of like Robert Downey Jr. started off as a promising young actor, went through this really dark period, and then emerged as like this kind of global superstar. But to see her at, probably age 5, or thereabouts playing Gertie, it's not just that she was a gifted actor. It also, I think, comes back to the writing, because so much, and I know I mentioned the whole CW thing, but when it comes to like little kids, there's this modern temptation to make them so much wiser beyond their years that they don't come off as kids you would actually meet. And it's not to say that Gertie as a character is dumb. She just seems like a really smart 5-year-old. Like there's that scene when she's E.T. has gotten into the family beer, and he's drunk behind the TV, and there's like a Sesame Street program with like, B box and all that stuff.
Bandit.
She Bandit, right? Crazy stuff. But she's sitting there like kind of mouthing along with E.T. She's like not like teaching him or something, because she's kind of learning the stuff too, and she keeps like, where's Mexico? And she keeps bringing up Mexico because it's like this mysterious thing she has no idea about. I think a modern version of it, I think of like, and this is supposed to be a few years older, but like the Princess Leia from the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, there's like, giving like philosophy lessons to 45-year-old Jedi. I'm like, I see what you're doing there, and I reject that Olsen twins nonsense. It was just so there. It's a shame that this movie is only coming out for one weekend in IMAX and is getting no push. Like, I almost found out about this on accident. I think maybe you told me about it. I'm like,
Probably.
we should go.
Well, it's funny because I'm looking at the stats and it says the IMAX release grossed 490,000 on its first day in 389 theaters for a 3-day total of 1.07 million and a 438 million running total. That's this weekend.
438 million in its for what, this release?
Yeah. So wait, so the IMAX release grossed 490,000. So it's also being released in real 3D. This reissue. I know it's weird. So I'm glad we went to the IMAX. Yeah, so I mean, I guess it's doing well for select audience. I mean, but when we showed up at our theater, we were like, 3 people of maybe 8. And eventually, after some of the trailers and stuff, people started to sit down. But yeah, I mean, I think this re-release model is a great idea, even if it is commemorating a certain anniversary. In this case, it's 40 years. But that's kind of like how I grew up watching movies, is there were always re-releases of classics, say like Disney movies, whether they be live action or animated. That's how I saw those, Robin Hood, Peter Pan, Snow White, that's how I saw those movies because I wasn't around when they were originally opened. So I mean, I think that stuff like this, like they're going to be re-releasing Jaws and Labor Day weekend in IMAX and 3D as well. I think it's a great idea. I mean, you mentioned perfect movie. I mean, Spielberg has 2 of them, E.T. and Jaws.
Where would you put like Raiders?
Well, so Raiders is my favorite movie of all time. And so, yes, I would say that that's perfect too, but I also realize that Raiders is doing a lot because it's comedy, drama, romance. Jaws and E.T. are simple stories. They're pretty much straightforward. A boy befriends an alien. 3 guys go out to kill a shark. And obviously there's a lot more to it. But Raiders is kind of it's harkening back to something that used to be those old serials and the cliffhangers and everything like that. But it's doing a lot in one movie. So it's my personal favorite Spielberg movie, and I think my favorite movie of all time. But I still maintain that like all 3 of these movies would be in my top 5 Spielberg, I think. And it would be hard to put them in order, but if pressed, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Huh. It's strange because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm having a hard time with modern movies,
Sure.
and I don't know. It's hard to say like what it is exactly, and I think part of it is the limitations of the time because I feel like the one of the problems is we can literally do anything in terms of like, Hollywood studios. If you have enough of a budget, you can
Right.
literally imagine anything on screen. I'm watching ET, and what some people might consider shortcuts or cheats, I'm considering like innovations that at the time these people made into magic. Like you only see parts of ET at a certain time because they have
Hmm.
to manage the puppeteers have to make it work. So
Hmm.
you'll see like just a hand, or you'll see him like behind a table, and you'll see his head kind of popping up out from behind something, or his hands kind of over here. So if you're looking for it, it looks kind of cheesy. But as a 5-year-old kid, and I imagine as a 10-year-old, you just thought you were watching an alien come to
Well,
life.
well, the good thing about that is it's it's probably for convenience filmmaking wise, but it's also purposeful in how they're telling a story. They're telling a story through the eyes of a child. So yes, I mean you are going to see like just ET's head rising above the table in Elliot's bedroom because we're looking at it from Elliot's POV,
Yeah.
his point of view. Same thing about all of the most of the adults up until the last maybe 20, 30 minutes of the movie. The only adults we see full figure is the mother. Everybody else is from the waist, from the belt and below. And Peter Coyote's character is pretty much known as like Mr. Keys because he's got these jangling
Mm.
keys on his belt. And in the opening, as he's looking with the government agents through the forest, through something that landed there somewhere, and eventually he turns out not to be a threat. And I always wanted to believe that he wound up dating, Elliot's mom, but I know, right? But yeah, it's all from the children's point of view, and it's also who's at the level of the children, especially Elliot, ET. So there's all this kind of view from even that one shot of the tailpipe of the car, these the guzzling tailpipe of the station wagon or the car or whatever. Why are we focused on that? Well, that's just the same eye level view of what would be at a child or ET's view.
It's a fascinating observation. I hadn't really picked up on that, but I'm replaying the movie in my head, and you're absolutely right. Um, you know, you mentioned Peter Coyote, and he's a he's a kind of character we don't really get in these sorts of movies. He's a government operative of some kind. We don't really find out who or what he is or who he represents.
Right.
But we do find out that he's not just there to get the thing so they can take it back to Washington or Langley or wherever and cut it
Hmm.
up for secrets. He really seems to care. When he's in the tent with Elliot, and Elliot says he came to me, and Keys says he came to me too. You're wondering, did this guy have some kind of an experience when he was a kid with these creatures, or is it just that he saw them landing, or he's been tracking them or whatever, so he wants to learn more about them? I started thinking about, not that I would ever want a sequel to this movie, and certainly not a remake,
Oh,
but I
geez.
did wonder what Elliot's life was like after this encounter. Like,
Mm,
did he grow up? I love the idea of Keys marrying Elliot's mom, but only in the context of like maybe the government would have him do that so he could like keep a close eye on the family in case
right.
these ever came back.
Come on, guys, let's move to Cape Canaveral. Florida's great year round.
Secret
Um,
agent dad.
right, right.
Um oh, speaking of Cape Canaveral, we have okay. I said this is a perfect movie. I'm gonna take one notch off this. The astronaut suits don't work.
Yeah, I mean, for when you're watching this for the first time, you almost feel like it could be like a dream sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it does feel very kind of Close Encounters-ish. And like, when she's like, "This is my house," I was like, whoa, even when I was a kid, I was like, whoa, this is like, why? I could see if it was kind of like hazmat suits, but why would you show up in astronaut suits at the home of this? It's like, what? And
Well,
and also
especially
like they also showed up. They like broke into her house when they weren't there and just going, with their detectors. And I'm like, huh?
well, I mean, I can see that, but that's why the astronaut suits don't really make sense because they've been through there. They've done the radiation tests, right? So
What are they trying to
it,
do?
I don't know. Yeah, it makes more sense that they would have hazmat suits unless they thought that the alien could open up a portal that would take them all directly to outer space.
That would be awesome. I'm just gonna dump you into space. Dunk, dunk. Wow.
Um, but
Yeah, maybe
now
that doesn't work so much.
here's a question because I was trying to rejigger this or retrace the steps. When do you think E.T. and Elliot made that psychic connection? Was it
Hmm.
something that they had to touch in order to do, or do you think it's just some kind of a bond that E.T. could put out there to, kind of imprint on someone else? Because they have this strong connection, but they don't really explain it and they don't make a huge deal about it. Like, which I think is fine. I like that.
Mhm.
You just kind of accept it, but I'm just trying to figure out, was there a moment when like they touched each other early on when like that could have happened?
I really think it was when he was, in the yard, coming closer to him at night, and then he basically, you know, Elliot wasn't afraid of him. Of course, initially, like you mentioned in the cornfield, sure, but he wasn't afraid of this new creature. I think deep down it was something that he just felt that he could connect with it, and it was something that was solely his that he's discovered. And um, I think you also have from this creature's point of view, he's stranded, and here's this boy, not a threat, not harming him, and inviting him, still in awe and nervous, but inviting him into his home. So I think it started there, but I think it really solidified when he's, in the bedroom saying, just introduce like, here's Greedo, and this is Boba Fett, here's Walrus Man and Snaggletooth, and this is a shark, and then nobody catches a shark, nobody eats a shark. And it's just like this bond, and you hear the twinkling piano from John Williams and everything during that moment. And when ET has to leave the room, or when Elliot has to leave the room, you see ET going, "Oh, where are you going?" So I think both of them have this childlike, obviously Elliot, but ET has this kind of childlike quality, even though he's very wise and intellectually advanced. He has telekinesis and kind of I guess a telepathy type of thing. But yeah, I mean and then of course we see the whole frog dissection montage thing, which is just really, kind of hilarious. And the whole kissing scene at the end that matches John Wayne's The Quiet Man with Maureen O'Hara. I thought that was funny.
I just couldn't get enough of E.T. drunk, like
Oh, so great.
flopping around
And again, a
falling
testament
over.
to Henry Thomas for like, a kid that age being drunk. It was just like, how do you direct that? It's like, I don't know. It's like, okay, you're
You
gonna
just
act drunk.
I think Spielberg just slipped him a couple of cans of Coors and
No doubt.
just go.
Like,
It's called method, kid. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
That that look he gives Erica Eleniak
Yeah,
where
he's
he
like,
kind of looks over his shoulders like like
yeah,
it's totally like, hey baby.
totally.
Yeah, wow.
Um, there were rumors that Harrison Ford was played the teacher in that scene, but it wasn't his voice, and so I don't know if those rumors were ever true. It would make sense since again, his wife was the screenwriter, but I never really got that. I don't know.
It would have been great is because you're right. We only see everything from the kids' points of view. It would have been great if there had just been one girl in the class when she closes her eyes and it just says "I love you" written
Oh
on
my
her
gosh. And then
eye
she
on
grows
her
up to be
lids.
in
Yeah.
Indiana. I guess that would, yeah, that would have been a weird connection. Um, Yeah, and I love the the three friends, the Dungeons and Dragons friends. I mean, look, obviously, a show like Stranger Things is so influenced by these movies from the 80s and everything. And so these guys felt like they were totally from, you know, Stranger Things and, even like the John Hughes movies that came out during those, back in the day. Those guys felt so, you know, teen, suburban, um 80s feel to them and everything. The big headphones and the one geeky guy had like the kind of like the printer's cap beret thing.
And then
Um
when C. Thomas Howell at the end, when he pulls the ski mask over him, I was just waiting for him to shout
I
Wolverines.
know, so great. And
That
it's
was
funny,
even
like
later
I
though,
was I
too.
was curious as to when he became C. Thomas Howell, because in the credits here it was just Tom Howell. Um
Hmm.
but I think the next time I remember seeing him was in Red Dawn. Or I guess maybe The Outsiders. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um
were those birth 82 or was Outsiders 83?
so The Outsiders came out in 83, the next year.
Wow.
Crazy, huh?
That was a great run for Mr. Thomas Howell slash C. Thomas Howell.
Totally. So
Um, hmm.
the the voice of E.T. is iconic, and it was later on, not that much later, that I learned, because there were so many things about E.T., that Deborah Winger was one of the voices of E.T. Also Spielberg and Pat Walsh or Welsh. Pat Welsh um, is one of the. She was more of a radio actress, like a voice actor, and had this raspy voice. But I mean, credit to Ben Burt, the great Ben Burt, who did sound design for all the Star Wars movies and everything. Had a phenomenal handle on even just like the noises that E2 makes, like kind of these like guttural, kind of like little cooing and purring and kind of rolling, growling types, sounds.
That purring sound reminded me of what we'd hear later in like the Predator. The Predator kind of makes that sound. Yeah, it's like an
Yeah,
alien cat sound. Yeah.
yeah, that would be a good movie. Alien versus or
E.T.
ET
versus
versus
Predator.
Predator. He'd
It,
just be like, ah.
no, it'd be great if the ETs turned out to be like this race of violent killers that the
Oh my
predators are
gosh.
afraid of.
It's only on Earth where they're peaceful. Everything else, they just go nuts.
In that opening scene where they're collecting those specimens and putting
Sure.
them onto the ship, you saw that tree with the face, right?
Tree with the face.
Yes.
Oh, like when they're inside the spaceship?
Inside the
Yeah.
spaceship, there's like this tree that has like an old man face in it or something.
No, I didn't notice that.
Okay. Next time you watch ET, look for it. It's very dark. It's
Okay.
kind of in shadow, but it's unmistakably there. I can't remember if I think it like moves its mouth and like makes some kind of a sound or something like that.
Whoa.
But I've noticed that since the first time I saw ET, and I always thought I never put it together that that would have been like a specimen they picked up from somewhere else. I always thought like that was the higher intelligence that was like guiding
Oh my
the
gosh.
ETs.
That'd been hilarious. Like ET's, like the sentient being father
Yeah.
that communicates with all of them.
Or like the space jockey, like from this is like another alien
Oh my
situation.
gosh. Yeah, I do remember that there was gonna be a sequel. There was not necessarily a sequel, but there was gonna be like a story, like a book sequel.
Hmm.
And it was gonna be like on the ET species planet. And I don't know how well that would have translated, because I mean, I don't know.
Well, it did help you did help me jog my memory of what I wanted to say earlier, which is that I always thought of ET as being a child because Elliot's a child and
Hmm.
ET, even though he's very expressive, we never find out kind of what's going on in his head and he does these kind of cutesy things. I'd almost want to see a story like this story told again, but from ET's perspective.
Mm.
Like, what if he's like this brilliant scientist where he comes from, and he's just like, what is going on here? I'm trapped with this kid. Now I got this monster attacking me, being, the family dog Harvey. And
Harvey.
it's like just to see almost like a comic book adaptation with the thought, narrative boxes everywhere, so you can figure out what's going on in his
That would
head. I
be
think
amazing.
that'd
That would
be,
be an interesting comic book, I think.
yeah.
You could get away with
Um,
that with the panels and everything.
you could. I mean,
Yeah.
well, hell, you could probably just like take frames from this movie. I'm not advocating piracy, but then I'm not advocating it, and just like print them out and put your own thought balloons in, all Alan Moore style.
That'd be hilarious. Um, yeah, I mean, it was such an impact on the culture. I mean, yeah, I think by the following year in 1983, E.T. had surpassed Star Wars to become the highest grossing film of all time. Not surprising
Wow.
because what else was that big back then? I mean, Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, and that's it. I mean, 83, you would have Return of the Jedi. 84, you would have Temple of Doom. Um, you know, it was either Lucas or Spielberg or something produced by Spielberg. In 82, they also had Poltergeist, which we mentioned earlier. And so it's like these movies, what was it? This came out in May. Yeah, I think, yeah, it was, yeah, May 26th, actually June 11th in the United States. It was the closing night film on May 26th at Cannes Film Festival. Yeah. Got, huge response, and then it dropped the following month. But of course was a week. I think it came out a week before, maybe a week or two before, like Blade Runner, The Thing, and so it was still like number one throughout the whole summer. And it's like, much like people are so surprised that Top Gun Maverick is, sweeping the summer. I mean, that was a lot of times commonplace in the summer of the 80s. It's like there was usually a big movie that, did a blockbuster movie that did so well that it just stayed in theaters all summer, and then eventually it got re-released. You know, um, I think you were saying before we watched this movie that Top Gun Maverick just got re-released, and I'm like, wait, did it
This
ever leave?
weekend.
Yeah, it's like,
Well, yeah,
out.
this weekend they were doing another big like theatrical push,
Yeah,
which, I don't mind it because it's fine. People enjoy it, but I almost wish that they'd picked a different weekend or something because, yeah, ET I think deserves more eyeballs on it. You know,
and it's weird. I think like ET, like at this point, makes some people like roll their eyes, like, oh, ET. It's like, why are they re-releasing that? And I'm like, I mean, I think it's a great thing, for people to be able to see. I mean, I would say over the past like maybe 5 or 10 years, is it? It's not Live Nation, is it? That does all these anniversary um
Fathom events.
Fathom
Yeah.
events. Fathom events do all these like anniversary screenings at most likely AMC theaters and stuff. So it's not too unheard of. But like I was saying, back in the day, a re-release of a classic movie would be like for months. It's like it's getting another run. Like Star Wars was re-released, many times, up until the sequel came out.
And speaking of which, they announced that they're going to be doing a re-release of Rogue One, a Star Wars story. I know there was some chatter in our Earth's Mightiest Critics Facebook
Mhm.
group, like why? And I know why. It's because it's
Yeah,
a direct tie into Andor, which is
sure.
coming out soon. But yeah, it's a weird thing because you can also watch it on Disney Plus. I don't know how many people like Rogue One did not set the world on fire.
No,
I think it's one of those things that was appreciated more after it got out of the theater. But I mean,
it
again, I don't
was
know.
it was a great big screen experience. It wasn't a great movie, but
Right.
it was, beautifully shot, and it's great to see on a big screen, sure. Um, Obviously one of the trailers that we've been seeing ad nauseum for months now, besides the Nicole Kidman ad, is the trailer for Avatar. And I've been wondering to myself, when are they going to announce that the original Avatar is going to be coming out in 3D in December, so you could watch them back to back. It would just obvious. It's a no-brainer. It just makes sense. So
Well, you mentioned AMC. They do those kinds of events all the time. Like
sure,
they did them with the Marvel movies. Like every time one come out,
right,
they'd like
right.
watch all of them for
Star Wars,
48
yeah,
hours.
right, right, yeah. And that's how people that's how people see those movies for the first time or get sick of them. It's a strange thing.
Well, but you were talking earlier about, that run of the 80s with the big summer movie, and it was Spielberg, Lucas, as you mentioned. But the thing that was so great about that time is it wasn't just these, hot popular directors putting out blockbusters.
Mhm.
They're putting out movies that were cultural and pop cultural, landmarks.
Yeah,
Like so many of
they
them in
became a
this
phenomenon.
this small period. You look at stuff now, you've got directors, or it's more like franchise driven now, I guess.
Yeah,
But
IP
it's like,
stuff.
right, there's like, hey, there's a new Fast and the Furious movie. Hey, there might be a new Transformers coming out. It's like all this recycled stuff, but nothing, visionary, nothing that sticks. Even someone like Jordan Peele,
I was just gonna say that.
coming out with Nope. It's weird because like the idea of a new Jordan Peele movie coming out seems to appeal to people, no pun intended. But then increasingly, it's like they come out and then there's no buzz or conversation after opening weekend.
Yeah, I can't think of a movie that has culturally taken off that is original. Like I'm not going to even include Top Gun Maverick because, like you said, it's just basically a legacy sequel. Um, I can't think of anything, I mean, I don't know, the biggest movie before that this year was The Batman or something like that. So obviously that's another Batman, you know. Um, yeah, it's just when we have original movies, um, regardless of how you feel about Jordan Peele's movies, is they are, his idea and they're original. And yes, maybe they pay homage to certain types of movies and they have, social commentary in them or whatever, but I still appreciated seeing his movies, as a kind of like a way to rescue us from all these IP franchise movies, in a way, give us a breather.
There's probably other examples, but the only one that really sticks out in my mind is frickin' La La Land from a few years ago.
Hmm.
Damien Chazelle,
Hmm.
because that was, beyond the Oscars controversy and everything. It had a really good, soundtrack, and it was kind of everywhere. It was memed, and it was kind of a hit. But it was also something that felt like not necessarily a throwback, but like you're saying, I'm going to the theater to see something that I have no expectation or idea what it's going to be. It's not a
Hmm.
sequel. It's not an adaptation of anything. I love that movie. I know it's got its detractors,
Yeah, I
but
love it too.
yeah, it's strange to see, like, coming out of ET, it just sort of solidified like why I've got a grudge against modern movies, and I'm waiting for the next Spielberg. And I'm not talking about the next filmmaker that people will call the next Spielberg. I'm
Mhm.
talking about the next true visionary who's going to blend technology,
Yeah,
storytelling, and human ambition and purpose into a work of art.
right. I mean, the Jordan Peele's been also called the next Spielberg. So is M. Night Shyamalan, all those guys, Abrams, okay, fine. But when are we going to have, a filmmaker who's, kind of relatively new that just stands on his own? I mean, I think, maybe somebody like Alex Garland or maybe Christopher Nolan. Um, I don't know. I mean, obviously, yeah, it's hard to say. Um,
Nolan's a good call out, because despite having been part of like the Batman franchise
sure.
and everything, his but he's actually a great call out, because he's one of the rare directors who, whatever his next movie is, it's going to draw a lot of interest,
Yeah.
and he works in all different kinds of genres.
Yeah.
What was it? Oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on it. The the airplane war movie he did a few years ago.
Dunkirk.
Dunkirk, yes. I keep wanting to say 1917, but that's, no, that's a
Different.
totally different thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Dunkirk, it's like, and Inception, this weird kind of like narratively jumbled thing with DiCaprio. No one knows what's going on. You can say like, oh, why would he go from making Batman to this other thing that no one's going to want to watch? And both of those movies become like amazingly high grossing films, partially on the
Right.
strength of just the person who's behind it, because there's a level of trust there that you're going to be going on a journey that in some regard you're not going to expect, but you're going to be rewarded by seeing it on a big screen.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time, I know you didn't see E.T. when it came out in 82 because like you said you were 5, but
No, I think I did.
oh,
Yeah.
you think you did? Okay.
I remember
So
seeing Empire Strikes Back when I was 2.
wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty vivid.
Well, actually, no, I would have been like 3. Yeah, because I was 80.
Yeah. And that could have been upon a re-release too. So
No, I mean, my one of my first memories was being in the theater watching Empire Strikes Back.
the year it
It's
came out
weird
though.
because, yeah,
Okay.
it's mostly impressions, which is strange, but yeah, it's and my parents have backed me up on it. I did go see like the movies on re-release, but yeah, I didn't see the first Star Wars in the theater. That was because I was a month old.
Yeah. I just remember the design, the look of ET was always interesting to me. Because it does the hands and the feet are kind of like the feet of say something like akin to something like a rhinoceros or something like that, or
Mm.
some kind of like a clawed reptile or something like that. And then you just have this kind of like lumpy body and the elongated neck only when he gets like excited or curious. But the face just becomes like iconic. And I remember like having so much fun like drawing that face. And it dawned on me that it's not too far of a stretch from Yoda's face. And of course, there's that great scene when they go trick or treating. When they throw a sheet over ET so he can look like Gertie dressed as a ghost. He's seeing everything again from his point of view, and he sees another little kid dressed up as Yoda, and he's like, "Home, home!" and because I mean, Yoda's face kind of resembles, if you just look at the face of ET, with the wrinkles and the kind of like the protruding kind of upper lip, and the kind of like the snub nose. I mean, it kind of looks like ET a little bit. So yeah.
Let me put this out there to you, David. We've established, unofficially, this all takes place in the same Star Wars universe. Maybe Yoda's species and the ETs lived on the same planet. So
Could
maybe he was saying home because he's like, hey, can I hitch a ride with you?
Right. You're like on the dark side of my planet. Can I hitch a ride back? Yeah. And so they must have been you know, amy, amicable species, not like, say Korean Skrull or something.
My one of my favorite bits was Mad Magazine did a parody of like movie tie-in products, and one of them was ET brand canned ham. Because because if you tilt the ham, the
Oh, it's
container the
true.
right way, it
The
looks
shape
like
kind of looks like
yes.
ET. So
Yeah.
hilarious. Yeah, and I was reading up on the design of the face, and I guess Carlo Rambaldi, who designed the aliens for Close Encounters and ET, um, they they basically based the face off of Carl Sandburg, Albert Einstein, and Ernest Hemingway. Like what? Huh? Okay.
So that's a person who hated Carl Sandburg and Ernest Hemingway. Yeah. I don't see it. The only thing I see really is and I know these came out years later, but Johnny Five from Short Circuit and then Wally.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I could see that those guys were kind of like ET, of course. Um, yeah, and it's just it's funny how, all these behind the scenes stories get told. I'm sure it was just like so crazy to work with, an actor in a little outfit, ET, and just the way he wobbles, like, now watching him 40 years later, that's really the only way that actor could walk in the suit. That's it. Um, but yeah, it going back to the way Drew Barrymore behaves as Gertie around ET. Yes, it's a very naturalistic performance, but it's also it seems so unrehearsed, like the way she's like, I don't like the way his feet look, and when she's bringing the little fill in the wagon with stuff in the house on her way to Elliot's room, the mom's like, where are you going, Gertie? I'm gonna go play in Elliot's room, Mary. It's like I noticed this time around there's a couple times where they call her Mary, and it just, again, it reminded me of me, growing up, with, eventually when my parents split, I would often call my mom by her first name just to kind of like test it out, it was, it was one of those pick your battles with your kids. It's like that's one of the things that she just kind of let fly, it's like whatever, but I love that it's kind of like they're testing all that out, but it's also a way to develop a closeness too, because Michael at one point calls her Mary too. So I thought it's a nice touch.
Well, there's also, for as much as they have that kind of antagonism in certain cases, there is that protectiveness. Like, when Elliot makes that remark about, or he just kind of mentions, he's trying to convince his family that he saw something in the yard. And he said, Dad would have believed me, or Dad would believe me.
Yeah.
And then your mom's like, why don't you call your dad? And he's like, I can't. He's in Mexico with Sally. And she just like gets up and excuses herself and goes to the kitchen. And then Michael's like, I'm gonna kill you. Why can't you just, be normal or something?
Think
So
of
he's trying
anybody
to
else
be
but yourself. Yeah.
right. He's trying to be protective of, the mom. And so it really does, there's like this whole other life. Like I would watch this family
Mm-hmm.
even if the alien had never showed up in
Right.
their
Even if this
backyard.
wasn't ET, if it was more about like trying to figure out, trying to navigate life as a single mother, trying to navigate life as a newly single mother, and trying to navigate life as all of a sudden me and my siblings don't have a dad. What's happening?
Right, with three very different ages
Yeah.
because they're about 5 years apart. Because Michael's
Yeah.
15, he's learning to drive. Elliot's 10, and Jordy's 5.
Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts on ET, the extraterrestrial?
I mean, it's just a very dear to my heart movie, and that's why I had no qualms at all about revisiting this. Trying to think of like other, movies that I wouldn't mind like seeing, in an kind of like an re-release, anniversary release. This is definitely up there with that. I mean, I've seen Raiders before on the big screen as a re-release. I probably will check out Jaws. Um, might even bring my guest today. Who knows? We'll see.
He's
Yeah,
making his way through Spielberg. Yeah.
I know. I might as well, right? But yeah, it's just I'm surprised, that I'm sure there are people out there who haven't seen it. Like the weird walk-in that we had, like with 20 minutes left in the movie today. So strange. You could sit and I'm thinking to myself, okay, some people are late to a movie, but when you show up like with 20 minutes left and they're settling themselves down, not sitting not far away from us, and I'm thinking this is a huge IMAX theater. You have all these empty seats. It's just, of course, it happens where they're going to sit next to us. And it's an older man and his daughter, adult daughter, and they're like getting settled. And then he leans over to me, is like, is this commercial? And I'm like, no, it's a movie. This is ET. It's like, and I'm thinking, it's like, this is when ET's like dying, right? And it's like, who doesn't
Yeah.
know this? And this guy has white hair and everything. And granted, he has a Polish accent. Maybe he didn't see this movie. I don't know. And he's like, he goes to us, he goes, where is Elvis? And I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
that's
come
right.
on now. Come on. Like
In
Elvis
his
has left
defense,
the building.
I was gonna say, in his defense, they both start with the letter E.
That's yeah, that it could have been on the marquee, just E, and then they just went in, It's so funny.
Yeah, it is frustrating because it is one of the most emotional moments of the movie because I think he had just died and Elliot was going over to talk to him in the freezer and then he comes
Right.
back. So he goes from being extremely sad to being extremely overjoyed and then extremely like worried, like, okay, now how do we get him out of here?
Right.
And this whole time is like, is this Elvis? No.
And it was so distracting because I felt so bad because I'm sitting next to an 11-year-old boy who's first time seeing this, and I'm like, "You're ruining this."
Well, I just, there is hope for the new generation because he didn't at any point pull out a phone and start like texting his friends out of boredom. And he seemed to be really into it from what we were talking about afterwards. So, yeah, which again, like, why not just have a big push, a 40th anniversary re-release of this thing? Just keep it in theaters for like a couple of weeks and see what happens.
Especially in August. What else is out there?
Yes.
I mean, come on.
Bullet Train.
Well,
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thank you for it. Occurs to me this is the second week in a row we've spent Sunday nights talking about aliens coming to Earth. Last week was Prey, and now we've got ET. So a slight difference in terms of quality. But yeah, thank you very much, David Fowley, of keeping it real. Folks, if you enjoyed this conversation, glitches and all, which hopefully I'll edit around so you'll have no idea what I'm talking about right now. You can check David's stuff out at Keeping It Real down below. And if you like this channel and this content, please subscribe and like and all that good stuff. And we'll be back next time, whenever that is, whatever that is. Till then, take care.
All right. Thank you very much.